It was really funny throughout some of their design work and stuff that we were doing. They're like, well, we don't like that color.
I would rather someone tell me there is no way that's going to sell. You need to pivot.
If your logo doesn't have an icon, just stop.
I want to get to the point where, people see that and without even thinking about it, they're like, that's Anson Belt.
So today we're going to talk a little more about branding, and we have a couple of pillars here we're going to try to go over. And the first one is the importance of cohesive branding in e-commerce. Why is that important, and what have you done to kind of like focus on that and so forth? Yeah.
And why do you think it's important?
And why do you think? Yeah. Why do you? It's just, let's see how many times we can say important.
It's extremely important because you need to make sure, that when your customer sees your logo or sees, hopefully you get to a point where your single logo, without your name, it gets recognized. So like your hat, for example, Triworks. When I see that, I instantly know Triworks. When you see, this Anson, A, which some, it's funny because some people say it's an A. It's really our buckle. So you turn it sideways like this. It's like the traditional buckle. But, I want to get to the point where, people see that and without even thinking about it, they're like, that's Anson Belt, and we're starting to get there, especially with our fans, of course. But, we're doing a lot of stuff, with East Carolina and being a sponsorship as the official belt of ECU athletics. And, one of the things that I want is, for me to be able to put a logo somewhere in the stadium and people instantly just know that that's Anson Belt without even having to have, our name next to it.
Yeah, that goes right into like the second point of this, the importance of like the creative behind this and creating a proper logo from day one.
Yep, exactly.
And I say not just even creating it, but then like being 100% on it and going forward with it.
Yep.
Like obviously logos and branding can change over time.
Exactly.
In
and I was going to say that, well,
in small ways,
right? And in big ways, that's.
Right? But you've got to be careful.
You got to be committed. Yep, absolutely. And you have to know when that time to know when it's okay to move on.
Yeah, I know we've dealt with. Yeah, go for it.
I was just going to say, I do think that it's important to come up with a brandable logo early on.
Yep.
A lot of people like their logos, their name and their tagline.
Well, you have to think of how you're going to embroider
where you're using it.
Yeah.
So that's one thing that I learned about when ECU did their whole logo revision. And there was one that was really, really cool, but they couldn't use it as the official one because they said that it couldn't be embroidered very well. So that's how they think of all these college teams. You look at their logos, they can be embroidered well. So when you're choosing one, you don't want to have too much intricate, text within the logo that's going to be hard to think about embroidering, although you may never do that, but that's going to keep it more simple and less complicated.
Yeah, a lot of times you can't read the logo.
Exactly.
And when you think about it, they have a older demographic for an audience, and they have this big tree, and then underneath there's a bunch of letters, and the people can't read it. So it's like they try to figure out what it is. Another thing I always say is clarity trumps persuasion. So stop trying to be pretty and flowery, just clarity. And if you look at the logos that have lasted and that are like long time and like people recognize them, they're very clear.
Iconic silhouettes almost.
They're simple.
They're simple. We deal with this all the time, logo design stuff, and clients come in. And whenever you build pieces of content off of that, the first thing we ask for is like, one, do you have brand guideline standards? Do you have a logo? And because whatever we make, we want to make off of that to where that brand feels consistent. And I cannot tell you how many terrible logos we've dealt with and seen and looked at. And it really goes back to that same, is it simplistic? Is it easy? And it's as easy as looking at a company like Apple, right? I mean, everybody uses Apple. I mean, it's Apple. They sell computers.
With a bite out of it.
But it doesn't say everything I do in it. Like everybody sees a logo and they like, but how are you going to know I sell computers?
Yeah.
It's a freaking Apple, right? Like with ours is the whole thing with like the hamburger. Yeah, there's some symbolism there, but it's the hamburger, right? Like you do all these other things. And yours is genius because you have a product, like, and your product is kind of in that product. So that thought between it. And so anybody out there trying to create a brand and you going through the logo, two things here. Like, I hope this isn't a bad thing, but 99 designs, right? So everybody uses a lot of the 99 design stuff. And certainly that's a feasible, cheap option for some of that. But you also have to remember and think like, where's your logo going and where's your brand going? Right.
I think that's a good thing. I think that's a good site to get ideas.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a final product.
I love what I do, and I've used 99 Designs. I love that you get the perspective of a handful of different designers. And so that's one thing that you get stuck with. If you work with one designer, you're going to work with how they, I mean, they always are going to lean towards a certain style. And so a site like 99 Designs, if you can afford to do it, which I mean, it's, if to get the,
and some of it's good, but also just be mindful of like the Leary, right? Is some of these design guys, even though the paperwork says they can't use it and resell it, we have come across many times variations of logos that are the same. Yeah. And so keep in mind, remember, if I'm doing 99 designs, and this is like a whole different world, but we go down 99 designs, right? And they submit a bunch of logos to you and you decline them. You have no contract with the guy that submitted those designs to you.
Yeah.
However, the next guy that comes in, he can sell those designs to anybody he wants. So there's a lot of likelihood through your coercion of creating that logo and that feedback and back and forth that they can fine tune their designs and sell them to others. So I have personally seen designs that have been used across different brands and places. They're like, man, that's that guy's logo. So it doesn't matter if you're like a local business or something, right? That doesn't matter. However, if you're an Anson Belt and you're going to go, you're going to be everywhere at some point, you don't want those likenesses sold. So there is a value in highlighting, hiring a creative agency that's going to build something from you, like this vector and customized perfectly for you and this all together. So I think it's really important establishing that logo to start off before you start going crazy on the other stuff. But yeah,
absolutely.
So creating a memorable logo, and then let's talk about design. Like, why did you choose certain colors with your logo, for example?
Yeah, I mean, so to us, it meant a lot. In going back to ECU, I mean, my father and I are both pirates, and so purple has always, meant a lot to us. But it also, to me, really signified, royalty.
Royalty's rich,
and quality, and so that I felt like when people would see, and that's, that's pretty common to hear that purple is associated with that. So that really made me, I said, from the beginning, I wanted this to be a quality product, and I wanted people to feel like, okay, it's worth, $49.99, $50 for a belt.
Yeah.
And so, that's one of the colors that we went with. The
color's
color
important.
That we went with.
Are colors important when people are associating with a brand? What is Google, Alphabet?
Yep.
Colors. There's a lot of science behind how people react to
and
colors,
how they feel,
and how they feel, and what they kind of expect. Greens, and so forth.
I was going to say that it does matter, and if you can Google color wheel,
yes,
and when it comes up, it actually they've done a lot of research and science under how different colors affect you different ways or what you associate with it, and I do think that matters. Like blues and oranges and purple and a couple of those colors are like a warmer color that people associate trust and like comfort. And then there's like red and green and all those are like movement and or air, things like that. So you got to be very careful what you choose as a color too.
We recently did this whole thing for this insurance company out of I won't mention any names, but it was really funny throughout some of their design work and stuff that we were doing. They're like, well, we don't like that color. Like, what do you mean you don't like that color? Like, no, we don't like that color. Like, what color are you using? And we're like, it's the color in your logo, right? And they're like, it is, And so, I mean, like you hear, it sounds hilarious and crazy. So if you're in that part of your life and your business where you're creating that logo and those standards and those colors, like this is something that's going to be used across platforms. Think about where it will be used. Like, if you're going to have e-commerce site, like you're going to have those tones and those colors, and you have really like this window of colors that you can use within that to stay within brand, right? And so
I will say where that matters is online. Red means an error, and blue means like a link, and so people automatically make certain assumptions based off the color of what they see. 100%. And so when you use reds, that site feels like something's wrong or it's broken or it's like stop. And you don't want them to do that. You want them to keep going through the process.
Yep. And back, not to go like back again, but going into like logo design, how important like a logo is, and really thinking not necessarily backwards on this is like, where am I using it? Where am I using this logo? And you hit on it a little bit, but I can't tell you how many, like think about even today, what we use a lot of social media, profile, do we have a hero thing, or we put it on a hat?
An icon. I mean,
you got to have an icon.
You need that.
If your logo doesn't have an icon, just stop.
Yep.
Rebuild
rethink it. Yep.
Rethink it. Like if your logo does
everything
not
from
have
the top of the tab, when you're at a tab on a web page, and
favicon,
so and even that
is favicon or favicon?
Favicon.
Yeah. So that little logo, but that's kind of the icon, your social media profile icon. Just what is that single logo?
Yeah, from the e-commerce perspective, if you have a tall logo, you're literally pushing everything down on your webpage. And if you look at the metrics, about 60% of people will never scroll. So if you have more than half your audience is only going to see what you give them, if you have a tall logo that pushes everything down,
jacked up,
you literally are eliminating sales right there. Yep. And people think, oh, that's dumb. Of course you're going to scroll. Again, you're probably an early adopter and you understand that. There's a lot of people that don't know that that's a menu if you don't say menu.
True. Icons are important. I would go as bold to say if you're creating a logo and you can't create an icon from that logo, start over. Yeah. Like, don't waste your money. You will at some point either have to pay to redo it all or set up. Like, you have to have that icon is so important.
And something you mentioned, redo it all, and that's kind of what you mentioned. Find your logo and stick with it and run with it. But there can be times in your business where you feel like, you know what, maybe
brand
this
refresh.
maybe I need a brand refresh. And that's what, a business like ourselves, we've been going almost 15 years. There was a time where we had our logo that was our stamp. So it was our wax stamp and it's what was on all of our packaging, and that logo really, I felt signified quality and all of those things that, we wanted to embody. But I also felt like it kind of had an old fashioned feel to it where, our product was so new and so innovative. And so I felt like it needed that refresh. Yeah. And now I feel like we have one that I don't think it will ever change. But, and when the designer designed it, I was kind of blown away because the buckle, this kind of like did the chicken come before the egg kind of thing. Like the buckle came before the logo. And so, we had this buckle for years. It was our, our flagship buckle that I designed. And any of the ones that you see these days have been, kind of knocked off from that because there was no one else doing an open-faced ratchet style belt when we did. And so they, when the designer came and approached me with that logo, I was blown away. Didn't have any revisions. I was like, you nailed it. How did I not think of this? Like, and he did it.
Your first logo was an A, right? It was the A in the wax.
Yeah. The first logo was actually an A. So we've had three. One was very cursive and very
serif, which I don't like at all. Serifs are usually terrible on logos.
It's really bad.
People love to put serifs in their fonts and stuff for logos and like.
They shouldn't have that anywhere on their website.
Thank you.
Yep.
Again,
can you say
clarity trumps persuasion.
Can you say that loud and clear again?
Yeah, if you make it difficult for them to read or have to figure out what it is, like gray font on a white background instead of black font on a background, like all of those things are subconscious, like making your site more difficult, confusing. You're creating friction, and whenever you do that, you'll sell less. So you can have your pretty fonts, but you get to pay for that by having less sales.
Yeah. The thing about your logo too is thinking about from the Anson belt from the beginning to this progressive and progressing forward in it is it feels natural. Mm-hmm. Like, so like the rebrand of that, like people thinking, well, I need to rebrand, do it the right amount of time, do the rebrand that takes the time to do the logo. 'Cause you would like the progression of what you've done. Like you would always, that's always been the logo.
Yeah,
like
but your logo got clearer and clearer and clearer. It didn't get like
muddy.
Oh, now we're a brand. We get to do whatever we feel like. And because everybody will know us, it's got cleaner and cleaner and cleaner. And so it's actually
and also more simple,
and more powerful.
Really, it definitely, it got, a lot more simple. And so
that's what I meant.
That's what I think, kind of
simpler,
and that it can be, iconic. Like I said, I want people to be able to see just a single silhouette logo and know instantly that's us.
Yeah, so logos are crazy important. We build the logo, we do the colors proper, we make sure it's clean, we make sure we have an icon, everything else builds around that. We use that to build our brand, and now we I say build our brand, we build our idea. And so we have this logo, and now it's like, okay, what are we going to tell our audience? So remember thinking about this kind of in a square of like, I've got a logo, the colors, all these feely good things, right? Of like what I want people to feel and experience by looking at this logo. Now we have to basically tell that story of what that is. So how important is it to keep all those things together, like right off the bat when we're going for sales or just being explored and seen by others?
One, I think details matter. So if your site looks like you just threw it up and it's a flea market and hey, we have all these things, it's almost like screaming, don't leave, find something that you like. Instead of, hey, this is who we are, this is what we do, and this is why you should shop with us.
Yeah, absolutely.
I've got some too. If you're
go ahead.
Like just within those things and thinking about that, like how important is storytelling
I think you need to know who you're talking to, and so who you want your customer to know who you are, and know who you're talking to, kind of from the beginning, and who you want to talk to, to sell your product. So I mean, how you kind of put together your branding and all of that kind of should tell that story without even saying it. So
yeah, your story matters. Your dad and you and your son all in the picture.
Yep.
And how you guys convey that.
As a family business.
And we're not leaving. Like we're here from my dad's generation to mine, and it'd be Jackson.
How
Carter.
So David and his team do a really good job of I think direct action call ads that he does. Like the way he shows the brand and shows the product, and you see it and you want it and you buy it. In this world of so many brands and doing this, how important is even beyond those direct ask campaigns? Because I feel like you've fine-tuned those. I mean, those are working great for you. Mm-hmm. At what point do you think it's important for maybe yourself or even other brands to tell a broader story of who and what you are to gain sales? Do you think it's important in today's time where someone wants to be attached to something, they want to help something or be part of something? How important is it to tell a story? For a brand to tell a story, or do you think it's not necessarily important? Because you certainly haven't had to do the latter. We speak with a lot of people. They're like, I want people to buy my product, not necessarily because it's good, but because of these reasons. Like, hey, we're helping women, or hey, we're doing this, and this product is the vehicle to get me there. And I think you see that a lot in some of the national type branding, where there's a Doritos commercial, a Nike's commercial. The product almost becomes secondary. It's more about the emotion and the feeling you get throughout that process, and then at the end you're like, yeah, I like that. So where do you think that plays a place in media and where someone's thinking about their brand and they're early on, right? I've got my logo, I've got my colors, I got my feel. Should I be thinking about direct ask, or should I be thinking about what I want people to think about who I am with my marketing?
So, I think that it's important, to know,
it's kind of a tough question because I don't think there's a direct. I don't think there's a correct
you have to
answer
have a
for
good
this.
product. So it starts with the product. That's what lures them in. So they have a problem and they're looking to solve that problem. So the product has to be what gets them interested in. They're not just looking for a family business, or they're not just looking for good customer service. They're looking for a product that they need. And so once they find that, okay, you have that product, now they start analyzing, who do I want to go with? And so for us, our customers are looking at our competitors. They're looking at, and we'll ask them, who else did you, consider when making this purchase? And so, we'll hear, that they looked at this. I mean, and they'll have 4 or 5 companies that they look at. And so you have to understand, our consumers these days have so many options, and there's so many brands out there, and there's so many people that sell X product that you sell. So why do they need to buy from you? And so, now that you have the product, you have what you're going to sell, make sure that that's great, make sure it's quality, make sure that, that's the best that it can be. And then make sure that your story, or however you're presenting yourself, is something that you feel like consumers would want to attach themselves to and spend their money with, open up their wallet and support these people. Because nowadays that we have so many options, and then there's so many, kind of faceless brands out there that people have no idea where it's coming from or who they're giving their money to. So that if you can build that and show them who you are, that sets you apart from a lot of sellers out there that either for whatever reason don't want to put their face out there. They don't want to say, or put their name behind the brand. Yeah, and I think they'll go with you over them.
My question to you is, how many good ideas have you seen that end up being a very unsuccessful business?
So many.
Right. So it's not, it wasn't that they didn't have a good cause or that they didn't believe in something. Like, in order to build a brand, you have to make sales. And so you can get caught up doing all this stuff that we're talking about and think that that's more important than making sales. But what's the most important is that you're making sales and then communicating with the customer and figuring out what's going on.
And following that sale through, So now that you've made the sale, now you've got to keep that custer, and you've got to, because it costs a lot of money to get that sale. So now you got to make sure that they buy again.
Someone's sitting on the fence, like again, this is like bottom of the ninth. Someone's sitting on the fence thinking about, I need to make a piece of marketing material right now. And this is kind of like where I'm at, what I'm doing. I feel like my product's pretty good. Like I'm confident about it, comfortable about it. Is that one, and I only have a budget to make one. Am I making a video to highlight the product and its feature, form, function, or am I trying to do that while also attaching to like a feel good piece? Because I can promise you, like in the world that we live in, like you have both. You need both. I think you need both. But there's a lot of people like, which one should I do? Which one do you think would actually drive more sales off the immediate until I had more opportunity?
I might have a different opinion than David or you. I think a good unboxing video that actually demonstrates the value and the quality of the product. In the end, it doesn't matter what people say they stand for. They care about themselves. And so when they get the product, if it's a good product and they can see and feel in that video what they're going to get, I think that's more important to them.
I think it's extremely valuable.
I was gonna say the product as well. Showing off that product, because again, that's what's going to lure them in. They have a problem and they need to solve it. And if you have that problem solver that they need, then they're going to look into it more. And once they look into it, when they go to your site, when they start doing their research, then that's kind of when you tell your story.
One of the most painful things that we do all the time is that we've had the pleasure, or whatever you want to call it, to make things for a lot of different people. And we always want to make the best anything that we can do for that, because ultimately for us, we want to be a representative of us, right? But there's only so much we can do up to a point, right? Your guys' his team does the side of stuff that like is so important. Like honestly, after the other day's conversation, thinking about that, and it's like, man, it's just so important, that portion of it. But for us, it's really hard to make something and it's going to fail. Yeah, I mean, like, let's be honest. Like, we're making it, but I'm like, dude, we're going to kill it because I have to kill it just for our own integrity.
Yeah. And it's not going anywhere.
But it's not going anywhere because you've seen, enough on the other side of this, of what's there and where you're pointing. And one of the big standouts from yesterday's conversation was this one thing, and we all, everyone likes to blame each other in the marketing business, the agency business. Like, I drove the traffic there. Like, your website didn't convert, so you should still pay me. Like, But I'm on the contrary of that. Like, you're just wasting your money. Like, honestly, at the end of the day, I want to make something for you, create something for you. But like, I'm all about making that in our business. I'm all about making that second, third, fourth, and fifth video. I could give a poop about the first video.
Honestly, if it was that simple, we wouldn't have a podcast about building a brand. We would say, hey, do this and you would win. But there's so many other things that all are part of the puzzle to building a brand. One of them is a presentation. One of them is the product. One is the follow-up and the relationship. One is the repeat customers. One is driving ads.
Yeah. How important is it to take that negative feedback from the ones close around you? Like in our case, right, I weigh on this and I try to be really kind of blunt at times. Like, it's just not good enough. Like, you have got to fix these things or just manage those expectations. How important is that early on those ideas of things for people to hear that and to move to get into that market of like, there is a demand for this versus, no, I want it to be this way. If you've got that mentality, what?
I would say any conversation that you're not willing to have means you don't care enough. So if you care enough, you'll have the hard conversations and be honest. And so I believe that you're doing them a disservice if you're just fluffing their ego and saying, oh, this is amazing, it's so nice. I would rather someone tell me, there is no way that's going to sell. You need to pivot, or you need to make these few changes from what you've seen in the marketplace in order for that to work. Like, you're literally being mean and doing a disservice if you talk in such a gentle way that they don't make the pivot that they need to make.
Or the other hard one is this happens too, David. It's like, you're like, this exists, right? Like, this is already out there in a very much just a better way than you've got. And like, really, unless you've got a couple million to spend, go maybe think of something else.
Yeah, or everybody that wants to get into print on demand. It's awesome.
Yeah, I keep trying to get mad on this.
You can get into it fairly inexpensively. But like, if you have clip art designs, people aren't going to buy that anymore. That sold 6-8 years ago when it was brand new. Now you can get a shirt to say anything you want. And so if your designs aren't amazing, you're not going to cut.
It's also important to not listen. I mean, you need the feedback from people closest to you in your circle, but then not listening to every single idea that everyone has.
Oh man, because you can be swamped by it,
they'll
right?
say, "Oh, well, you should do this and you should do that," and it's like, yeah, that's that there's this big of a market that wants that, and so you really have to think, It's nice, having that constructive criticism if they'll give it to you. And that's another thing. You don't want to have everybody that's just going to say how awesome it is and really, fluff it up. You want people that are going to give constructive criticism so that you can make it better, but not, listening to every idea that, someone says.
I think that's a super good point. Go into that deeper. Like if you try to get super duper niche, how big is your audience compared to?
Absolutely.
Yeah. If you can go much broader.
Yeah. Brand storytelling, staying on brand, thinking about how people are going to perceive your brand will be one, the forward-facing assets you have. We talked again about logo. We talked about some of those things. How important is it if we live in this world of social media too? How important is it for those things to also feel on brand and part of it? I know we deal with this all the time on a daily. A lot of our, aggravations is when maybe other people have access to the platforms we're trying to manage and creating the branding content for, and then all of a sudden, boom, that crap picture goes up there, and you're like, So
I think the story matters.
The story matters, right? So someone again thinking about wanting to build something that's going to last years beyond themselves and stuff. How important is it to kind of establish that from a very early, like this is how we're doing? Doesn't mean you can't change it. Like this is you can't. It's not saying you can't change it, but how important is it to have that story just resonate over and over again with maybe the style and feel and look of that imagery, even up to the point of the things that you share to your page and so forth. What do you think in today's time?
I think it's very important. You want to establish that consistency, and you want people to be able to see, your work or whatever you're doing, and instantly recognize, okay, that's that brand's, because they have that kind of feel or look to their, to what they're putting out there, to their content.
What about people that are? What about people? I know this is a loaded question. Again, dealing with this on firsthand, reels are a thing now, right? So reels are this thing that we're all making and creating, and views and things like this is something and likes where everybody's chasing them, but they don't necessarily. It doesn't necessarily convert into sales. It doesn't necessarily convert into traffic. So how important is it, and how should we be thinking about those things when thinking like, hey, I'm chasing after that. What does it mean now? My brand looks different because the stuff I'm putting out there because I want those likes and I'm following those trends.
You're chasing those trends.
And you're trends and those trends. But yet now my brand's not looking that good.
It's looking trendy instead of what I...
Talk about some of that maturity.
My personal belief is that your story is always your story, and you should always tell that story. If you look at the really big brands that go away, they eventually thought that they outgrew their story. They did. They stopped telling it, and then nobody associated themselves with them anymore. If they would have stuck to their story all along, those are the ones that literally stay and stay and stay.
Cool.